Stand-up paddleboarding has a huge number of disciplines, but by far the biggest is people looking to get out leisure paddling or cruising, whether that be down on the coast or the local rivers and the local lakes. So today we're going to look at how best to do it. So what kit you need, what personal equipment you need to wear, and also the conditions that are going to be best to get you out there and keep you safe. Leisure paddling is by far the most popular type of stand-up paddleboarding. It's become an increasingly common sight across the UK's beaches, with groups of family and friends getting out on the water. An appealing and accessible sport, from young to old, this type of paddling is one that everyone can enjoy. We head to Brighton to cruise along its iconic coastline with local paddler Shaun. We'll take you through the kit, setup and basic tips for getting on the water. So let's start off getting the kit together. When you're picking your board for paddling, first of all you're looking at something with the right length and also the right width. So boards mostly between 10 to 12 foot in length will give you a good range of being able to cruise along and travel a bit of distance, but also a bit of manoeuvrability. Now in terms of leisure paddling and cruising around, most boards that are used are inflatable. So there's a few safety considerations we need to look at before we get ourselves on the water. So when looking at an inflatable board, the most important thing is we have the right PSI or the right pressure in the board. Now most boards will give you guidance either on the pump or on the valve itself. And it's really important to make sure there's enough pressure in the board. If not, the board will bend in the middle and sag. It will be difficult to paddle, but also you're losing a vital part of buoyancy and safety when you're on the water. So make sure you've got the right PSI on the board, which is normally well over 15 or well over 20 PSI. It's also important to make sure that it's airtight. So there's no leaks, nothing coming out the board, and there's nothing coming out the valve itself. Once you've got the board well pumped up, next thing to check is your fin. So different boards have different fin setups. This is a single fin at the moment, and I just need to make sure that the fin's securely fitted and I'm not going to lose that on the water or while I'm out there paddling. The most important bit of safety kit on my board is my leash. You should always wear a leash, no matter what the type of paddling you're doing. So my leash is now securely fitted, and I've chosen the coiled leash, which is going to give me the best performance when I'm out in the water, so it doesn't snag on anything in the water itself when I'm cruising along. My options are, so this is an ankle leash, but also it converts to a calf leash. I just need to make sure that's fully secure to me as I launch into the water for the first time. My last bit of equipment is the paddle itself. So in terms of my paddle, when I'm on a board that's an all-rounder, in terms of length, I'm looking at a paddle that's probably 6 to 10 inches above my head height. A couple of ways of checking that. I can either use this, or actually the best way is flop my wrist over the top. What that should mean is while I'm paddling, the handle's roughly coming through at eye height. Too short, and it might put a bit of pressure on my back. Too long, it's more likely to put pressures on my shoulders and give me some injury possibilities there. So make sure your paddle's at the right length, although as your paddling moves on, you might start to adjust it depending on your stroke. So once I've got my paddle length sorted, last thing to look at is actually my software, so what I'm going to be wearing when I'm out there, or any extra safety gear I might take with me. Now, although we've got our leash on our board, we're going to recommend wearing a buoyancy aid or PFD as well. It just means if we fall in the water, especially if it's cold or a lot colder than the air temperature, we've already got something that's going to help us stay buoyant when we first fall in, until we work our way back to a board. So a buoyancy aid like this would be perfect, or we could wear a gas inflatable PFD. The downside is we'd have to deploy that to give us the added buoyancy or the added safety once we've actually hit the water. The other thing we'd take with us is a mobile phone or potentially a radio, but in an aqua pack. So if we do get into trouble or we need to let someone know when we're going and when we're going to be back, we can get in contact with them really easily. The last consideration is the clothing you're going to wear. So a wetsuit is our normal go-to bit of kit that we'd wear. Often though, it might be too warm for a wetsuit. However, we do need to consider that especially when paddling in the sea or even lakes and rivers, even in midsummer, the water temperature can be really cold. The impact of cold water shock can have a massive issue on you. So are you dressed for submersion? Are you going to be okay if you fall in? And that's why we'd always recommend a buoyancy aid, but also possibly a wetsuit might be the best thing to wear when you're afloat. One of the best things about stand-up paddleboarding is its simplicity. I've got almost all the gear here I need to get myself on the water having a fantastic time. And because of this, it's incredibly accessible. That's one of the reasons we've seen so many people taking to the water over the last couple of summers and having a great time. But other than the kit, I've got one much bigger consideration I need to think about before getting out there, and that's the conditions that I need to be paddling in. There's certain conditions I need to avoid, and they're conditions that might challenge me a bit too much at the moment, but also stop me from being safe or stop me from getting back to shore. The number one of these is offshore winds. If I turn up at the beach or it's forecast for offshore winds, whilst it might look incredibly flat and inviting, as I get further from shore, it will get windier, making it harder and harder to get myself back to the beach. So I need to make sure the wind is in the right direction and at the right strength before I go afloat. Tide or flow or currents are the other side to this. So is there any tide that's going to stop me from making headway back to where I started, or are there currents that are going to take me away from a point of safety? The last thing might be deteriorating weather, maybe some swell, or other factors that are going to impact my paddling. One thing we often see in the summer is sea breezes, so wind building in the afternoon. So whilst we might launch in light winds that are perfect for paddleboarding, we might find very quickly that we're making it really hard to make headway or actually even stay on the board and paddle safely. So checking the forecast, checking with lifeguards and making sure you're up to the conditions and they're suitable for you is almost more important than just the kit you take. I met with local paddler Shaun and talked to her about getting into the sport. Shaun, you're a local here, and how did you first get into stand-up paddleboarding?
Came down here with my family, joined up as a member. Me and my mum had a little lesson together, just on the lagoon.
Do you remember the sort of difference in the kits, what you started on and what you use now?
I don't really remember what exactly it was that I started off on. I think it was an inflatable. And then now I'm on an inflatable 10-4 round nose board with a carbon paddle.
And do you feel quite a big gain from using the carbon paddle?
Yeah, definitely. They're much lighter. They're a bit easier to paddle with.
Starting on Lagoon and now like heading out on the sea.
Yeah.
So before you head out there, what sort of things do you check before you go out?
I'll always check the tide, wind and the waves as well.
And I guess you're looking for sort of minimum wind, flat as possible, and not small tides.
Yeah, I don't really like it. I kind of go either as it's low tide or as it's high tide because I don't really like the changing tide.
Yeah, so you don't like loads of water moving. So round high, round low, so your minimal tidal movement.
Yeah.
I guess if you don't kind of go one way really easily and not the other.
Yeah.
And if you were paddling out here, where would you go? Because I mean, obviously it's like pretty big, expansive bit of coastline. What's the general plan?
It does depend on which way the tide's going, but I'll either head towards the pier or towards shore.
So along the coast rather than straight out to sea?
Yeah,
cool.
Pretty much.
And what sort of gear do you normally take with you?
I'll always wear a wetsuit unless it's absolutely boiling, then I'll wear shorts and a t-shirt.
Yeah.
I'll always take a buoyancy aid with me and my phone as well.
So you're pretty well covered, and if you get any problems you can give someone a call.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing if you go along the coast well you can get out.
Nip in,
need to. Sounds good. And do you go with mates, go on your own? What do you tend to do?
Depends. Sometimes I go on my own just to clear my head, or sometimes I go out with my mates and we just muck around and just kind of stay in this area. It's quite nice sometimes as well when I'm out and seeing how busy the beach is and being like, I'm not in amongst all of that.
I'm guessing this beach is pretty busy in the summer, isn't it?
Yeah, when it gets hot, definitely. Yeah.
So you sort of skate the beach and clear your head, and sounds fantastic. Okay, well we'll get some gear sorted and we'll get out there.
Perfect, cool.
Sounds good. When going to a new location, It's well worth doing a few basic safety things before you go out for the first time. When you get onto the water, check the depth to make sure it's deep enough before standing up. If you're launching and landing in shallow water, you can always paddle in and out on your knees, or use self-rescue in a prone position. Prone position is a great way of getting yourself in or out when it's windy. You can help other paddlers as well. They can hold onto your leash, or you can use your international distress signal to try and attract attention. Stand-up paddleboarding is a great way to get out of the water and experience the sea from a new perspective. Hopefully we've given you some good information into staying safe, but the best way to start is always with a lesson from your local accredited centre.